Siot Ofa Kainga Ofena and Malue Lava Mai. Welcome back to the second episode of the Tongan Legends podcast. I'm here with my co-host slash guest star slash whatever he is, Ulise Funaki. He's joining us from Laie, Hawaii, right? That's where you're at, right?
I live in Kahuku, but it's
You live in
okay.
Kahuku?
One town over.
One town over. My bad, Kahuku. I forgot
Bad,
you
bad.
moved, huh? You're not in
Yeah.
TVA anymore.
No, I'm not TVA anymore. Oi.
All
Gotta
right.
miss the TVA days.
And I'm up here in Utah still. Today, in this episode, we are going to be talking about, well, we're going to start talking about the different ha'aotua. Ha'a is like a tribe or a clan or something like that. Otua is the Tongan word for God. So these God families, pretty much. There's three, or I guess there's technically could be four, but there's kind of three main ones we're going to focus on in this next few episodes. First one being Hikuleo, who is the oldest sister, just as a review from our previous episode. And then we're going to go over her younger brothers, Tangaloa and the Tangaloas, because there are more than one Tangaloa, and then the Maui Motoa and the Mauis. I'll go ahead and turn some time over to Funaki, let him kind of explain what she's all about, some of the stuff about her, and then I'll just throw in some questions or add any insights or thoughts on that.
All right. Malo lang mari ho ik magkainga fonua. Fatapu atu ge ngai ha ko tope me turiki ko tope fonua fatapu atu ge hawo mafakatau katea o kololo hau. And si otofa to everybody listening. Thank you again for having me, brother. Um, had a lot of good response last time to our first couple episodes, and so I'm excited to continue on. And thank goodness we have Zoom now to record. We can be asynchronous and be from different parts of the world and still have great discussions like this. But yes, so we're talking about today Havea Hikule'o. If everyone recalls from the last time, the Tongan cosmogony or the origin, there's that expensive word again. You know, the Tongan cosmogony or the origin stories of how we believe the world and the universe and our people were created. Havea Hikuleo is in what, the fourth generation since coming home from the ancient homeland of Pulotu, and she is the eldest daughter, eldest child, Goifanaulahia, of Taufulifonua and his first wife, Havea Lolofonua. And so the oldest daughter then is Havea Hikuleo. Following Havea Hikuleo, or often referred to as just Hikuleo, is Tangaloa Eiki and the younger brother Maui Motua. Uh, so in regards to Havea Hikuleo, after Taufulifonua had created the different parts of the world, especially Tonga Mamao, and they had all journeyed and migrated from Pulotu, he is specifically given the fatongia, or the responsibility of caring for, watching over Pulotu to the eldest child, to Havea Hikuleo. And so that's where we're going to take it today, is kind of focus a little more on her fatongia and more aspects about Pulotu, the ancient Tongan homeland. Yeah. Before I continue on, anything else, Kona, you want to add to that, or?
So in some old records of
Mm-hmm.
legends and stuff, a lot of times they will talk about Havea Hikule'o as a man, or sometimes she is either mistaken as or taken as a man. I don't know
Yeah.
if anybody would ever have that question themselves, but why do you think that is?
Well, the consensus now with many Tongan scholars and many Tongans in general that do understand the story is that Hikuleo is a girl, is a female, is a woman. But you're right. There's still a lot of records from the missionaries and from other foreign scholars that wrote about Hikuleo refer to her as a male. Um, there's a lot of good debates on Facebook and social media as to the biological sex of Hikuleo or her gender. Um, that's the consensus. That's a female because of the different things, like the giving of the land to her, the Pulotu, the brothers kind of, you know, whakamamao from her, keeping their distance, um, and that the gifts, the first fruits of the harvest were gifted to her, as we do today. in our, after our harvest, we always make sure we take first to Fahu or to our sisters. Um, but it's no surprise that there's confusion over her gender or her biological sex, because in Tongan language, as you know, we don't really distinguish. There's no distinguishing word for he or she. We use the same word. It's ne or ia. And so that could be a factor. That might be a reason why the early scholars that came and did work didn't understand that. But also, we can't discount also that maybe um, they couldn't believe that our society had a female god as its highest deity. And so, could have assumed that it was a male. She has a lot of characteristics that are usually attributed to males. Her power to destroy everything if she wanted to, her rule over the ancient homeland, her rule over her brothers, the gift giving to her. And so that's, in a lot of traditional societies, that's seen as very male. So um,
Would you say that's primarily like a Western society view as that male figure, or do you think it is in Polynesian or Tongan society as well?
I think that's very much introduced culture and introduced thing from many cultures. We can see that the emphasis on the female lines is definitely present in other islands of our people. In Samoa with the Feangainga and brother sister, and even in Hawaii, with female ruling chiefs, high chiefs, and so it's definitely introduced. Even when, and again, not throwing any shade onto any particular religion, but especially when Christianity came, there's a definite division between the men and women, in many churches, where the women were not allowed to hold priestly offices or to even give a malanga, a talk in church. Whereas in ancient Tongan culture, even as Captain Cook had arrived, there were female priests, high priests of the old order, of the old religion, and so it's definitely there. We can see that very different.
All right, cool. Just wanted to like clarify, just in case anybody out and doing your reading, doing your own research stuff, you come across anything talking about Hikuleo as a man, because that does exist out there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to clarify that. So you mentioned a little bit in there the inasi, or like the first fruits. I guess in what kind of like traditional Tongan ceremonies was Hikuleo recognized?
From what we understand, is Hikuleo mainly played a role in that, in the inasi. To those who do not know what the inasi is, it occurred twice a year. It was the annual, the harvest. So at the harvesting of the first fruits of the land, it was all given to, and it wasn't just in on Tongatapu, but it was everyone from Vava'u to Ha'apai, even extending to other island Tongan colonies. In Uvea, in parts of Samoa, people would come from all over to bring their gifts and their harvest, first fruits of the harvest, to give to the Tu'itonga. The Tu'itonga was known to be Hikule'o's high priests on earth. That was yeah.
So they bring stuff to her. That's the same reason why in a family function, like at a wedding or whatever it is, you always take the first thing to the fahu.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely a part of that. And you were saying earlier, with the different wow, a lot of the Tongan scholars and a lot of the cultural experts and whatnot, have shown that Hikuleo and Tangalo and Maui, although they were, very important, the most important, they didn't really play so much of a role in the everyday lives of the Tongan people, because they were such high gods. They were mainly a thing to talk about between the high chiefs. Yeah, whereas many of the other chiefs and the regular everyday Tongan people were more focused on their daily lives, but also had a lot more to do with their family gods and their personal gods from their clans, from different areas in Tonga, whereas things that had to do with Hikuleo was mainly kept for the Tuitonga and his priests, and in specific areas. Not everywhere had a temple for her. I believe there was, from what's understood from the most recent research, is there was maybe 2 or 3. That's it. You would think, oh, as the highest god, she'd have more, but actually not. I believe the main one, of course, was at Olotele in La Paja, at the main inner sanctum of the Tuitonga's realm. Another one in Uiha, I believe, and then I think another one Ha'ano. And if anyone out there listening has any corrections to that, please comment or let us know. I don't have that note right here in front of me, but a big part of Tongan lives was with their personal gods.
As far as the creation of Tonga, so we've gotten to the creation of the gods. Now, these next few episodes, when we're talking about the Mauis, the Tangaloas, and Hikuleo, they're kind of the main 3, I guess, god groups or ha'autua, because they created, they're accredited with the creation of the islands that we now refer to as the Kingdom of Tonga, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So well, actually, I can talk about this. No,
Yeah.
Because so I spent a lot of my time in Tonga, both when I was living there, doing my own stuff, and as a missionary, I spent a lot of my time in Vava'u and Ha'apai and the Niuas. I was kind of all over the place. But if you go out to Longomapu well, I don't know, if any of you have been to Vava'u, you go out to Longomapu, go out to the west side, if you look out on the horizon, a lot of times, especially if it's a clear day or if the sun's setting, you'll see this kind of big triangle sitting right there on the horizon, right? And that is latte. If you go to Ha'apai, again, Ha'apai is not very big and everything's on the west side of the islands. But if you look out, especially during a sunset or something, which is gorgeous. If you guys, you need to go to Tonga. You need to go and go to Tonga Tapu. Tonga Tapu is great. Everybody loves Tonga. But go out to Ha'apai and Vava'u and just look at some of the sunsets there. I still think that Ha'apai has the best sunsets in the world. But just imagine this freaking amazing, red and yellow and orange and every color imaginable sunset going down. And then you see the outline of it's a triangle, it's a volcanic island kind of sitting on the horizon. And that would be, I think that's Kau. Is that right?
Yeah.
Were you not by much?
Yeah, I was in the Lulunga group. Yeah. So from where we were, we could see Kau and Tofua. Being in Hapai, though, you can see it right there on the horizon. It's like in a movie. It's like in a movie. There's this giant triangle shooting up out of the ocean, and it's a volcano.
Yeah,
and this huge island just out there. And
so those are the islands that Hikuleo created. And then there's Hunga Ha'apai and Hunga Tonga. Those are also volcanic islands, right?
Yes. There's, to those in Tonga who are not familiar in Tonga, there's 3 Hunga islands. And so Hikuleo is the creator of Hunga in Ha'apai and the Hunga in Bai Tongatapu. Yeah.
And then Kau, Latte. What's the other one in Ha'apai?
So you have Kau, Tofua, 2 Hungas in Ha'apai and Tongatapu, Latte and Fonuale. That's the other.
Fonuale is between Vava'u and Niua. It's towards the Niuas, pretty much. So anyway, so she created all of these kind of volcanic islands. Most of them are not inhabited, though.
Yeah.
But outside of that, what do we know about her? What is there anything else we know about her, or her significance, I guess?
A lot of other oral traditions, see her as, again, very powerful, a very jealous god, in some of the stories. There's not really much stories or oral traditions, rather, about Hikuleo, primarily just a story about her or whatever she had done. A lot of the stories involving Hikuleo is stories about other people who have come into contact with her. And there's a good amount of Tongans, great heroes or lesser gods that journeyed to Pulotu. It was possible. You could go to Pulotu in the ancient days. That was the belief, but it was an arduous journey. And when there, you would experience a lot of strange activity. But one of the things you would definitely see there was Hikuleo and her power she had there. her influence over everything in Pulotu that would extend beyond Pulotu shores. Um, she was to all of those lands listening, have open up your ears now. But she was a very avid kava drinker. Hikuleo was very well known as a very good kava drinker. When you would arrive in Pulotu, you'd probably find her drinking kava next to the puko tree. There was a special tree in Pulotu that was called the puko tree, and it could speak, it could talk, and the puko tree would act as the toa and would serve the kava to her. And another big part of the story and the narrative of Hikuleo is her connection to Pulotu. And many of the things that we have in Tongan society are ranked, meaning they have rank, meaning they have certain things that are higher level for the chiefs, other things that are lower level for the commoners. And what we see with that pattern is that many of the things that are seen as really high ranking flowers or mats or part of our daily lives that are really high ranking usually come from Pulotu, the realm of Hikuleo, So Pulotu plays an important part in her identity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well.
So you mentioned kind of Pulotu and its powers before. We've kind of talked about, and I don't know a ton about this, is why I'm asking you. You're
Yeah.
the expert on this subject.
Oh no,
But
that's
so a lot of high-ranking things, we know that anything kind of significant that happens in Tonga is related back to Hikuleo and Pulotu.
yeah,
But so to me, I would think, aside from different kava ceremonies, which kava plays a role in everything,
yeah,
but the biggest kind of event that happens for Tongans would be a putu, would be a
mm,
funeral.
yeah.
So can you expand, or can you kind of explain to us what is the relation between Pulotu, the funerals we have, and Pulotu and Hikuleo and all of that?
Sure, sure. So another really important aspect of about the identity of Hikuleo is again her connection with Pulotu, and Pulotu again is known as the ancestral homeland of the Tongans. Yeah, that's where our first ancestors had come from. In contrast to other Polynesian islands who, cite Hawaii or Hawaii, in the many different ways to say it as their homeland. Tongans believe we don't come from there. Tongans believe, that's way later. Um, but in again with Pulotu, the idea with Pulotu again, it's the ancestral homeland, and so many of the scholars, many of our Tongan experts had believed, when you die, our spirits return home. Now there's this idea as well that it was mainly the chiefs. There's you'll read a lot of stories, you'll read a lot of history about Tonga, and it'll say that the Tongans believe that only the spirits of the chiefs, and only chiefs had spirits at all. Only their spirits would return back to Pulotu. But we see a lot of evidence in our culture now, and especially in our culture before, and in the way a lot of our stories play out, that that's not the case. That all of our spirits, you know, would return to Pulotu. Um, Even today, like you said, the Meafgaeki, the Putu, these Apisia, these funerary rites, everything, nearly everything to do with a Tongan funeral has something to do with the return to Pulotu. A lot of the knowledge that I gained from this comes again from those who have taught me over the years. Of course, David Kaili. Also, this is a lot of knowledge from the Falevai family, Faifekau Popi Mafileo, a very well-known Tongan cultural expert here in Hawaii. So, in a Tongan funeral, we believe the spirits go back to Pulotu. Every village in Tonga has, a set of hatufunga or undertakers, right? To take care of the different funerary rites, to make sure the bodies are taken care of and prepared properly. As the funeral takes place, everything got to go perfect. They really need something to happen perfect. They need things to go well. They try to get as much as they can to make this funeral go right, because the idea and belief is that if things don't go right, if the funeral is not done properly, then the spirits in Pulotu will not be pleased, and they will actually reject the spirit of the person deceased until the family gets things right. The funerary march to the malae, to the graveyard, is done very slow because they're on a journey back home to Pulotu, and you need to be careful. If you mess up anything, on the march there, issues happen, and just going too fast in general, it's seen as not very chiefly, not very proper, and so they go slow, lest the spirits in Pulotu, our ancestors, become upset. Another big part of the Tongan funeral is the burial. For many of the burials that occur, sometimes we have to bury, and hufanga he whakatapu, we might bury a couple people in a similar grave. When you do that, when you open up the earth, the fonua, and expose, the bones and expose the bodies of our ancestors, Tongans, what they'll do is they'll do what's called an akolo. Well, they'll stand in a circle with a giant tapa, a giant ngatu, to block so that nobody can look in. Only the undertakers, the special chiefly undertakers, will be inside handling what's going on, preparing the body or taking care of the body that are in there, because that's pretty much looking into Pulotu. The Tongans believe if you look in there, you're next. The spirits will take your spirit back to Pulotu, and so that's why they cover it, to protect everybody. And so what they do also then is after the burial, if you notice in Tonga, a lot of the graveyards in Tonga are at the beach.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for this is because they believe that the canoes, the ships from Pulotu will come, and that's where they're going to land. And so they will take the spirit then of the deceased and take them to Pulotu from the beach. We bury them in sand, again, because at the beach, we believe that it keeps the body warm in the winter months, and the sand will keep the body cool in the summer months. The way that the ngatu is wrapped around the body, the tie, the knot is tied at the top, and then they're buried so that when the ancestors come to pull them out, it's easier for them to untie it and pull the spirit out and return with them to Pulotu, And so you'll see some families in Utah. I've seen some of it, in other places outside of Tonga. They always put a little bit of sand in the grave, and that goes back to Tonga. That's all back to Tonga, and it all has to do with making sure that the spirits in Pulotu are pleased, that they're not angered, that they won't be, pretty much they won't be pissed off and take your ancestor, your deceased relative, back to Pulotu with them. So to all of those, who are, Tongan Christians, hey, your Tongan funerary practices are very, very much still old school and have a lot to do with our ancient ancestors, Hikuleo and Pulotu.
That's awesome, dude.
Long explanation, I'm sorry.
No. I'm grateful for that, because I was kind of familiar with like the idea like only the Undertaker people.
Yeah, the tufunga, the hot
Yeah,
tufunga.
I knew that like only they were allowed to look into the grave,
Yeah, yeah,
and because I'd been to quite a few funerals where they had those practices,
yeah,
and it was all understood as tapu, but the
yeah,
root of that tapu
yeah.
nature was unknown to me. That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, no
Hope
worries.
you guys out there watching, listening, enjoyed that. That was that's some koloa right there. That's some valuable knowledge and stuff.
Not
It's
all.
no, that's sweet. That's epic.
There's a lot more, in Tongan funerals there's a lot more to it, especially when you get, like you said, the regal side, to the royal family and the king's body, hufanga whakatapu, to the ho'eiki. There's even more. The
Yeah.
sacredness behind that is definitely about Pulotu, and those families that are hatufunga, that are a part of the Tongan Undertaker clans and the Mimatapu, the sacred hands. They truly, they believe it, that they are the gatekeepers to Pulotu. Um, that's in their blood, man. And so another thing with them, I believe, from what Popi Mafileo had taught, that the undertakers, the belief is that they actually have two spirits, the Hatufunga, one here on earth and the other in Pulotu.
Wow.
And from there, that's how they're able to communicate and to move the body from this end back home. So
That's crazy. So is the Ha'atufunga is that like each family has their own? So, for example, each family has its own fahu, each family has its own ulumotua, each family has like the tuasina, like it's a part of, there's certain part of the family. In a specific family, would it have its own ha'atufunga, or is that just per village kind of thing? Like, does your ability to act as one of those tufunga have anything to do with your relation to the deceased?
Definitely. I mean, everything we do in Tonga is about relationships, but would the tufunga be from specific, will be in your family,
Yeah,
like part of your family? It's more on the clan level. It's the whole village level, and in Tonga, literally, you're related to your whole village. So these tufunga families, there are certain families that are tufunga, but they're not just tufunga for just one family. You know what I mean?
yeah.
They serve a purpose for the whole village, the whole clan, and so, and if there's anybody out there listening again,
Yeah.
we're definitely
Enlighten
open.
us. We're both,
Enlighten us. That's what I had learned. So
we're both still students and
learning, yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Anybody listening out there, if you want to add anything or ask any questions, feel free to reach out to either of us via our social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram. Also, you can follow the links or YouTube comments wherever it's at. If you go to anchor.fm/ngahawoma-fagatokatea, which is the website in my Instagram bio and on my Facebook page, you can also leave a message or a comment or something on that page. So if you guys have any input or questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us and we can do an episode where we talk about those things as well. But as far as Hikuleo and Pulotu goes, I think, she'll come up. We'll be talking about stories for days, and I'm sure she'll come up in a lot of those.
Yeah.
But
You haven't seen the last of Hikuleo yet. She'll still
she's
popping up.
always there.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like it's crazy. Like it's cool how well it's interesting how apparent she is, but
Yeah.
not openly apparent.
Yeah. Yeah. She's very
That's
influential in our culture, but not out in the open a lot. It's
yeah.
very, yeah.
Kind of like the Wizard of Oz, kind of like behind the screen
Oh,
there.
reference.
We'll go ahead and close this episode up talking about Hikuleo. Hope you guys enjoyed that and learned something. I know I did. Again, special thanks to my co-host Ulise for sharing a lot of that stuff. And the next episode we'll be talking about the Tangaloas. So hope you all enjoyed that. Malo Alpito, and we will see you next time around.